A lot of times in the instructions, it will say to trim your seam allowance. Basically, the reason why they want you to do that is so that you don't end up with a lot of bulky fabric around those seams. Now, what I do when I'm trimming away my seam allowance, essentially you just want to trim close to the stitching, is I use these zigzag scissors. And what that will do is it will help with fraying, because you'll notice as soon as you start cutting into this fabric, it's going to start fraying, and you don't want your fabric to unravel. Just going to lay that down and just trim, again, really close to that stitching. First off, excuse the hair. Second off, apparently I'm an idiot, because I was sitting here reading these instructions and doing the instructions for bodice A, which is not the dress I'm doing dress B. So I was like, oh, that's fine. And then I started to notice that, oh, the bodice that I just sewed is showing that the front bit isn't together. That this part is not stitched yet. So the decision then came to, well, do I just make dress A, or do I rip the seam and make dress B? And I decided to actually go and go ahead and rip the seam. So I'm using my seam ripper, and I've got it started already. That's the hardest part when you're ripping a seam, is to just get it started. And once you get it started, it's pretty easy to do. Because believe me, mistakes are going to happen. This is, I think, my second or third. So, I mean, it's just the nature of what you're doing, and, you know, I'm learning, so. But what I do is I kind of just lightly pull that fabric right over my finger and place my seam ripper right in there. Do you guys like how I was so calm about, like, oh, I made a mistake? No big deal. No big deal. Just a mistake. Whatever. Yeah, it wasn't that calm when it happened. It was more. Alright, so I'm going to rip this and I'll be back. You know, one of the things I found kind of confusing about these instructions, because usually when it says to do something other than the 5/8 inch seam allowance, it will actually say with the, you know, it'll say like 1/2 inch seam allowance on this. But for this one, it's saying stitch together at center back ending at square, which if you remember when we did our pattern markings, we did the lines for the center back, center front, those kind of things. That's where it wants you to stitch. So instead of saying a certain inch, it's saying where you marked it on the pattern. So where are we right now? Right now we've got our back stay stitched. We've got our front midriff pieces stitched to our bodice front, along with the back of the bodice, the neck of the bodice stitched together. One of the other things you want to be doing as you're stitching it together, that it doesn't say on every step, but it says in the beginning, is to press your seams open as you go. So unless it tells you otherwise, you're going to lay that seam open and run your iron right across it so you have a nice open seam. There are times where it will tell you something different, like when it's telling you to do the bodice, it's telling you to press the seam towards the midriff, so that means we're going to press it down. Now when you're ironing over sections that have gathers, you want to be sure that you're ironing below the gathers. You don't want to actually iron on top of them, because then you're going to press your gathers flat and it's not going to look as good. Now here's coming a tricky part. It's asking us to take our center back and pin and stitch it to our center back waist. Now if you remember, the center back waist we expanded, and if you see, if I just line this up, you're going to see that we have more fabric, that the center back waist is wider than the center back of our dress. So when we're pinning this up, we're going to do small tucks to kind of begin to match this up. Now we want to be strategic about where we place those tucks because that is going to be seen on the other side. Now the other thing is when you're pinning this, it's kind of hard because it's kind of hard to just lay it across and pin it. So the most important thing to do is to match up your center back. So I'm going to lay that seam of that center right along the point of here. I can't actually see. So I'm going to lay that seam so it meets up with that point of our back. Once that's good, I'm going to go ahead and pin that. I'm going to pin that crosswise. And I'm going to pin one down as well. So now what I'm going to do is focus on just pinning one side of this. And I am going to pin it so that my edges meet. So you'll notice we've got a little bit of extra fabric going off the side here. It's that odd corner point, which is fine, which is if we look at our instructions, which is exactly what they have showing on theirs. So that's what we want to do. And we're going to line our notches up. Again, you always want to make sure that your fabric is meeting edge to edge. You don't want one piece to be longer than the other. And I pin towards where my edges meet. And the reason why I do that is when I'm sewing on the machine, it's easier to pull out my pins. And again, the reason why this is happening is because of that customized sizing. And I don't want to enlarge the back because that's not where my waist needs the help. So, but you want to get that tuck closest to the edge of your fabric as possible because then that will be, a lot of that is going to be absorbed up into the seam allowance. Making sure we keep our edges of our fabric together. We're just going to try to bring that tuck as close to the edge of our fabric as we can get it. Because then what that will do is when we're stitching this bit, to the other, a lot of that that tucking of the fabric is going to be within that seam allowance. So as you can see, on this side we've got a little bit of gather, but like I said, a lot of that's going to be absorbed into the seam allowance. And as you can see on this side, we've just kind of given it a good couple of tucks really close to the edge of the seam. Alright, let's get stitching. So that's it for today's So Vintage. And the next installment we're going to be talking about notching necklines, and also we're going to be adding the lining for the dress as well, for the bodice. So that's exciting because we're going to get to take a look at the bodice and how it looks so far, and it's actually starting to look like a really real dress, which is so exciting. As always, to show your support of A Vintage Vanity and the So Vintage series, go ahead and click the thumbs up. It's a quick way to let me know you like what's going on here. Also, if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe, and that will let you know when new videos are posted here on my channel. And there's some great videos coming out in the near future that I'm really ecstatic about. There's a great, if you like the hair tutorials, there's a great vintage winter collaboration that I'm doing that's coming out soon, and I'm so excited. We're talking hair, we're talking makeup, we're talking fabulous YouTubers, and if you like the sewing series, I'm going to be doing a one-off video in the next couple of weeks on how to make a vintage hand muff. Yeah, we're getting into those cold winter months, and here's a stylish way of keeping those digits warm. So those are coming up. So if you don't want to miss those videos, go ahead and subscribe. And I love hearing from you guys, so please let me know thoughts, comments, suggestions, opinions, all in the comment section below. And I will see you guys soon. Bye.